Hey, what's going on? Do you find that no matter how hard you work, your fitness training programs, whether you're building strength, gaining muscle, trying to draw body fat, you find that they're just not really delivering? Well, let's talk about it. So, I've been a in the fitness business for over 20 years now, as a personal trainer, as a performance coach, and as a gym owner. So, in that time, I've seen thousands of clients, everybody from age 7, I think was my youngest, to 99. Um, and I've seen all sorts of training programs come in the door. I've been in public gyms, I've seen other people's training programs, famous ones on the internet, all that type of stuff. And there's a few common mistakes that I see over and over and over again that hold a lot of people back. And a lot of times it's not hard work. It's the it's the kind of mistaken thinking in the program that runs people into trouble. So today I'm going to talk about 7 things to not do in your training program, as well as if you stick around to the end, I've got a couple other points that I'm going to get into that are going to be really useful for your overall thinking to help you create the best training program that you can create to achieve the results you're trying to achieve. So, with that said, let's get into it. Get into my notes here. So, the first one that I see over and over and over again, and I see this a lot with my consultations with new clients, is trying to train everything at once, right? And by that, I don't mean like training your whole body. Like probably you should train your whole body. But when I when I meet with a new prospective client, a lot of times, and I talk about what type of training they've been doing, assuming that they're not starting fresh, it it's just all over the place, right? They do some stuff for speed, they do some stuff for strength, they do some stuff for gaining muscle mass, and yet at the same time, they're also hopping into spin classes or some sort of boot camp thing or doing some sort of a YouTube video workout for fat loss, right? And it's they're trying to do everything all at the same time. And the body just doesn't work that way, right? So you can train multiple qualities, and that's like strength, speed, size, fat loss, whatever it may be, mobility. You can train them concurrently using a conjugate system or concurrent system to be nerdy here. Um, but at the same time, you can't emphasize all of them at once, right? When somebody is very, very new at training, they have a very young training age, then they can make a lot of progress in a lot of things, right? You take somebody that hasn't done anything for a long time as an adult, or you get a young kid or something like that, and you just expose them to training, a lot of those qualities will improve at the same time. They'll get bigger, they'll get faster, they'll get leaner, they'll get stronger, all at the same time. And it gives this illusion that they can continue to make that type of progress forever. But what's really happening there is they're just going from untrained to trained. And by virtue of whatever it may be, by virtue of that stimulus, they're seeing that progress. Eventually, though, that just doesn't keep going. Like otherwise, we'd all be ripped and bench 500 and run an 11-second 100 and all this other stuff. That's clearly not true, right? So, with that in mind, you eventually need to kind of focus on what it is you're training at any given time, right? And so you need to emphasize certain things. And certain things are going to kind of go hand in hand, like getting stronger and getting bigger, gaining muscle mass, right? Those two tend to kind of work together. So, assuming that your nutrition is on point and all the other stuff, you can get bigger and stronger relatively at the same time. But getting much bigger and stronger while improving your endurance, that one they tend to kind of contradict. And again, not to say that it's impossible, not to say that people don't do it, but it's going to be harder and you're probably going to get kind of subpar results at both. So when you're thinking about what it is you're going to train for this next period of time, right? Like maybe you operate on 1 month cycles or 3 month cycles or whatever it is that works best for your schedule and your training program. Focus on one or two qualities at a time to improve and make sure that they don't contradict. And then within that, the other qualities, they don't need to go away. Like you don't need to train just speed and ignore everything else because then you'll lose your size, you'll lose your strength, you'll lose the stuff that you worked hard to keep before. Instead, at that point, work more towards maintenance of that. So where you may be training speed 3 days a week, and whatever speed means to you, but you may be training that 3 days a week while you're really trying to amp that up, right? So maybe if you go into a strength building phase or a size building phase, pare that down to like one speed day a week. So now you're not expending as much energy on speed, but you're still keeping your body with some stimulus. Because remember, it's always easier to maintain something once you have it. And this is something that people kind of ignore. You know, maintenance of a quality is usually not all that hard, right? Peak, maybe, but maintenance of a good like 90% of close to your peak is really not that tough. You just need to give your body a reason to keep it. It's acquiring new ground that takes a lot of work. So while you're working on that size and strength, maybe you pare your speed back down to like once a week, like I said, and then you can keep most of your speed, build some size and strength. And then your next phase, maybe you want to kind of go to that next level, make use of that new strength to get even faster. Then you kind of move into another speed focused thing, but you do a little bit of strength work, you do a little bit of hypertrophy work to kind of keep those going. So look at it in cycles and have a really clear definition when you're writing your training program on what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish. Because if you can have that definition in mind, you can build towards that and then focus on what you want to put it on maintenance, put that on maintenance. And then when you go to your next cycle, now you know where you want to move. You can look at your results. You're like, hey, I did really well on this cycle, was consistent, and I got XYZ stronger. I added 30 pounds to my bench. I added 40 pounds to my squat. Okay, cool. That worked. Now let's move on to the next thing. So focus on what it is you're trying to focus on versus trying to train everything at once. Next thing is, and this is super common, is missing training sessions, right? And now I get it. Like life happens. You know, if you're an adult, you're going to miss some training sessions unless you have like a nailed in schedule and, you know, your personality and everything else really puts you to that. But if you write a program that has you training 4 days a week, let's say, and you build up over the weeks and you do your thing and whatever, again, whatever your program is, I'm going to be pretty program agnostic in this video. But you only actually get to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. You're not doing your program. So how do you know if the program is working? You don't, because you're not doing it. You're doing a half-assed version of it, right? So again, are you going to miss some sessions once in a while? Yes. You're going to get sick. You know, you're going to have to take your kids somewhere. Your boss going to have you work late. There's going to be a wedding that comes up. You know what I mean? There's going to be stuff. And sometimes it's good to build a little flex in your programs. But the biggest thing I find with clients is missing training sessions, especially habitually, is one of the signs that I can tell that they're going to struggle in their progress. You know, I would rather have a client come in, say, hey, you know, not feeling on it today, didn't get good sleep, my nutrition's been messed up, you know, that type of thing. Come in and get a session in, even if it wasn't like a top tier session. Come in, get warmed up, do some submax work, whatever it may be, and check the box that you got it in versus missing sessions entirely. Because something is better than nothing. 1 is better than 0, right? But number 2, it keeps your head in it, keeps your mind in it. And it allows you to kind of build that habit and that, you know, that work ethic that's going to be what takes you in the long run, because programs come and go. Um, Progress changes over time. But if you're not doing the work on a consistent basis, you're always going to struggle, and you're always going to be kind of chasing that next magical thing. And the real magical thing is the consistency. So even if you're not feeling it that day, even if you're, you know, again, sleep wasn't on point, nutrition wasn't on point, and it's just not an A+ day, come in and give a B, right? Versus just skipping the session entirely, because that's the next habit you're building, is skipping sessions when things get hard. And any good training program is going to get hard. The body grows from doing hard things. So you got to kind of work through those hard things, you know, and that's what's going to be able to keep you going. And remember, like I talked about in the previous point, maintenance is much lower of a threshold than acquiring new ground. So even if you come in that day, it's not an A+ day, and you hit a B+ session or a B session or even a C, that's enough to keep you from slipping and losing ground. So it's more important to kind of get it in, right? You'll make a lot more progress in the long run just from doing that, just from showing up. And I've found myself personally and with clients that a lot of times on days where I don't really feel it, things aren't going that well, come in, get warmed up. And by the time I'm warmed up, the nervous system's fired up, especially if the gym has some energy in it, some people are getting after it. I find I actually have a pretty good session on a day where I didn't think I was going to. So it doesn't always work that way, but you'll surprise yourself more often than not. Once you get kind of going, get rolling, the nervous system will take over and you'll have a pretty good session. So, number 3, in regards to warming up, don't over warm up, right? There's this trend in fitness, particularly in the athletic realm or the quasi like adult athletic realm, of doing these very long, intricate warm ups, right? And I've been a big advocate of a good warm up, right? Doing a good warm up, especially when you get a little older like me, like a lot of my clients are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Um, you can't just come in cold like when you were 20, throw some plates on the bar and just start racking weight. It just doesn't work. Like, you know, accumulated injuries over time, tissue stress, that type of thing. You get hurt if you do that. You got to get warmed up a little bit. So I'm a huge fan of warm ups. I'm a huge fan of dynamic warm ups, moving your body through ranges of motion as opposed to like just hopping on a treadmill or some slow static stretching. I think you should start to prime the body to do the things you're going to do. So I'm a big fan of that. But I now see people taking it way too far. I see people taking 30, 40, 50 minutes to do a warm up, with all kinds of bands and everything else. That's a workout. It may be a submaximal, low key, not productive workout, but that's a workout. 30 minutes warming up. If you need 30 minutes to warm up, you've got some other structural stuff going on that you need to work out. But come in, do a nice crisp warm up. In my training programs, we have the relentless warm up that we do, moves you through ranges of motion, practices athletic movement. You do all the major body movements, squatting, lunging, pushing, pulling, all that type of stuff. And at the beginning, when people start out, if they're not used to a lot of things, it is a workout. The warm up is a workout. A lot of times I've had people take 10, 15 minutes to get through it. Turns into a good little body weight circuit workout. But after, a couple weeks, their general physical preparedness comes up. They kind of get more conditioned, more in shape, and they learn the movements for that matter. Most of my clients can come in, they knock this workout out, this warm up rather out. It's about 5 minutes, maybe 6. And they're good to go. They've got a little light sweat going. They've moved all their joints through all the major ranges of motion, and they're ready to go tackle whatever it is they're going to do. And then when it comes to the big exercises of the day, like say your squat, your deadlift, your bench press, whatever you're going to do a couple of light sets. You've done a little warm up from, in our case, the relentless warm up. And if you do want to work with us, work with me, then there's links in the description. Find me, work with me. Looking for new clients always. So, but they do the warm up, they do the relentless warm up, and then do a few light sets of whatever the movement is to prime that motion and get the nervous system going for that motion. And then they're ready to go. They're ready to hit it hard. They're in their workout. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 at the outside if you're super cold. I live in Maine. So, in January and February, you come in, you walk into the gym, it's cold. You're cold. You've been cold. The drive was cold. Sometimes you got to take a few minutes to just do some light stuff just to kind of get the blood flowing again. But anything more than that, and you're over warming up. And all that's going to do is tire you out, put you in the gym for more time. So your hormonal levels are going to go down and exhaust you for your current the exercise you had planned. So you're not going to do as much. Not valuable. If nothing else, it's going to start to wear you down. So don't over warm up. Get in there, get warmed up, get ready to go, and then hit it. Next thing I see in programs. Program may be very well written, but people jump too fast, right? And this is common. I've done this. I think everybody has done this. When you start a program out, traditionally, the weights are sub-maximal, right? So like, let's say you can bench press 225 for 10 reps, right? Day one of a program, you've got a 12-week program laid out. Day one of a 12-week program, probably you don't want to bench press 225 for 10, and that's your max, right? Because you're going to end up that you might get it that week. Next week, you might get it. You jump to 235, you might get it. 245, probably not going to get it. Week after that, 255, you're burnt out and you're going to go down to 255, whatever it is, for 5 or 6 reps if you're lucky. That's not useful because you've got 12 weeks in this program and you've already burnt yourself out, right? And you make those too big of jumps, you're going to start missing prescribed weights and missing prescribed reps. And that's the point of a program in the first place. It's not just come in and do as much as you can. It's to ramp and build into something, right? When people are first starting out, very low training age, they can probably get away with that for a while. Again, kind of like we were talking about at the beginning. You get like really, a lot of progress when you're beginning because you're just learning. But once you kind of get to the point where you're, a couple of years into your training, you can't do that anymore. You've got to be a little more strategic. So the body responds to progressive overload. Now, whether you use progressive overload within a system like a conjugate system or within something like that, or whether you use it with just straight progressive overload, like linear periodization cycles, again, talking nerd a little bit, doesn't matter. The body grows from doing more of the same thing over time. So use the small weights, small jumps, small improvements. If you think about it and you were able to add 5 pounds a week, so the little 2.5 pound plates on each side, just that, you were able to add that on your working sets for a year straight, 52 weeks. That's 260 pounds, right? So that would be the equivalent of the guy who came in on day one, bench 225 for 10, and suddenly he's at 385 for 10 after a year. Now, that's not going to happen. So, which it would be amazing if it did, but that's not going to happen. So, if you think about it, that's from only adding 5 pounds a week. So, why are you trying to stress and add 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds a week and make these huge jumps? Because all you're going to do is burn yourself out. You're better off taking little jumps, longer and slower, and using that progressive overload and letting your body really adapt over time. You'll find that you'll make progress longer. And by making progress longer, it's just like the money game. Give yourself more time to earn more interest. You'll make that progress longer. You'll avoid injuries, and you'll grow faster in the long run because you took a slower path, as counterintuitive as that is. Next thing I see, it's kind of in the same vein, is people change exercises way too fast, right? So it's been kind of made popular from circuit training programs, boot camp style programs, stuff like that. And it's basically just coming in and working hard every day at something, right? And doing some, not even necessarily a random workout, but doing a different workout every day and every week you come in. So you're exposing your body to a lot of new stimulus, which sounds really good. And at the very beginning, again, when people aren't used to that and they've never done that type of thing before, then it does work because people are learning, right? So you can deadlift one week, next week you do some squats, next week you do some whatever, and then 4 or 5 weeks later you come back, you deadlift again, and you get a bigger number. Great. You feel like you made progress. But what you really just did is you started to teach your body how to deadlift. So your body's using the muscle that it already has and figuring out, oh, okay, I've learned how to do this movement. It's called a motor pattern. You start to develop those patterns, but you develop them very, very haphazardly because you're changing things up all the time. So you don't have a lot of stuff to progress. Or to kind of base it on. So after a few months, the people that do that, they make this great progress at first because they're always learning new things. And again, 0 to 1, they're making the biggest jump. But after that, they kind of stall because they never got good at anything. And that your body's kind of made those low hanging fruit gains, so to speak. It's kind of made as much progress as it'll make from just simple exposure. So they really struggle at that point and they don't know what to do. And psychologically, it messes with them because they've been making such great progress that when that comes to a grinding halt, they don't know what to do because they're like, well, it was working for me. And suddenly it's not. Right. So instead, work on moving with what you're doing consistently until it stalls. And there is something to be said for changing exercises. You do have to eventually change again. Otherwise, we would all just bench press 1,000 because we'd bench press and make progress week after week after week. But run those exercises for a period of time until they start to run out, or at least until you prescribe them in your training program. So I find that once somebody gets above a certain training age and they get to where they're pretty good at movements, then changing up every 4 weeks is good. Every 8 weeks, you can kind of build weight over time and then swap the exercises out. You'll get a lot more progress out of them. When somebody's brand new, honestly, you could stick them on the same program for probably a year straight, and they could just keep kind of adding weight and maybe changing reps around a little bit and keep making progress. Now, most people aren't going to do that. So, because they get bored. I get it. But stick with stuff long enough to make progress. So whether you're swapping exercise every 6 weeks, every 12 weeks, whatever, give yourself more than that every day, every week change, because that's where you're going to end up just basically spinning your wheels. You're never going to get good enough at anything to squeeze the juice out of it. So make sure you're, sticking with stuff long enough to actually see improvement and give your body time for those structural changes to take place. Coming off that, the next thing I see is majoring in the minors, right? And I blame the internet for this, particularly Instagram. So every time you turn on any sort of fitness media, you see all kinds of cool stuff. Some wacky, cool exercise with bands and with chains and blah, blah, blah. And I love both of those things. Use the hell out of them. But you'll see, oh, if I do this and it's a contralateral movement on this and stabilizing this, you'll see this like very intricate exercise that's supposed to be the one exercise that blows everything away, right? The problem is there's 1,000 of those exercises, and they may be very, very good. They may do exactly what they say they're going to do. But the issue that people have with them is that they then take those exercises and say, well, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good. So let's put them all in a program. And before you know it, you've got this program that has 8 different exercises for the same body part and the same movement pattern, but every one of them is just a little bit different. And people can nerd out on, oh, well, this one's, pulling on this insertion and this one's doing this and blah, blah, blah. And you've got this bloated program that has so much overlap and has exercises that contradict each other and has exercises that pre-fatigue each other and stuff like that. And it ends up being a wreck because it's just, most of it's just minor stuff. Get good at the big movements and make those the cornerstone of your program. Whatever you're trying to do, and this video, this podcast, this whatever you want to call it, is not about demonizing certain exercises or crowing on certain exercises. The actual exercise selection, just like sets and rep selection, is usually kind of a minor thing if you've got all your other stuff in your program figured out. It really doesn't, like if you do 5 sets of 5 or 6 sets of 6 or 4 sets of 6, or really doesn't matter all that much. That's a minor thing, but people get so amped up into it. But focus on what you're doing, get good at the big exercises, the big pillars of what you're doing. Are you going to improve with some sort of a horizontal hip movement like a deadlift? Yeah, probably should do one. Are some of them going to be better for others in certain circumstances? Yes. Especially if you're competitive. Yeah. So pick 1 or 2 of the ones that are going to make the most sense for you, your body type, what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to accomplish. Do those. Are you trying to rehab one particular joint? You've got one particular issue you're trying to focus on? Great. Most of those are going to be little stabilizing muscle things, so they don't need a lot of work to improve. They're not big muscles. You're not blasting, your quads. You've got some sort of little thing you're working on around your knee or something like that. Pick one rehab exercise, do that, done, boom, good. Go back to working your legs. You know what I mean? Don't focus on adding in a whole bunch of little stuff and sequencing a bunch of stuff that's probably going to be overkill. And if you do need that, like you have a really severe issue you do need, and you're not a physical therapist, get with a physical therapist and have them take care of it. Last one, number 7. Training and dieting hard at the same time. I see this all the time. This is super common, and I get it because I want to make progress yesterday, just like everybody else. And, I'm on a journey right now myself, getting back in shape after injuries, life, and stuff like that. So I get it. Like the temptation's there for me. This is what I do for a living. And it's tempting for me to jump back into training full bore and slash my calories, slash my food, and diet hard at the same time. The problem with that is it's just like making those big jumps in training, like we talked about earlier. You burn out. You only have so many resources. And you only have so much energy, literally energy, but also mental energy to go with it. And you can only spend so much. So if you diet hard and you slash your calories, you're eating super clean, whatever it is your version of dieting hard is, that is going to severely impact your mental energy, your physical energy to train, as well as your recovery, right? You're just not going to feel good. If you're If your maintenance is 3,000 calories, you're a big guy like me, and you suddenly slash it to 1,500 calories, which is lower than I bring most of my women down, you'll lose a bunch of body fat first, real quick. It'll come flying off, right? Great. But after a few weeks, you're going to feel weak as a kitten. You're going to be stalled, and you're going to wonder where I go from here. The weight's going to stall, and what are you going to do? Slash more calories? Go even lower? Well, you really don't have far to go at that point. Up your cardio? Great. But now you're burnt out. Now you're starving all the time. That's really tough, right? You're just not going to have the energy to put into the gym. On the alternative, you're trying to train hard. You're trying to get strong. You're trying to gain or keep muscle mass while you're dieting. You're trying to bring that fire to the gym. You're going to be burnt. You're just not going to be able to do it. So your training is going to suck. So you're not going to retain as much muscle mass. You're certainly not going to make progress, and you're going to start to try to find ways to skip even training in the first place. Super common. So when I work with people, we address nutrition, we address the fitness, we work on both ends. Don't get me wrong, but I say, what are we going to work hard on first? Are we going to train hard, or are we going to diet hard? Because you got to kind of pick one. And here's a secret of what I usually do when it comes to working with people on this. If I've never worked with them, basically don't know them off the street, then, and they're not much of a trainer already, like they don't really work out much, then I say we can diet hard. Like we can get them on a pretty good diet. I'm not saying starve them, but get them on a pretty good diet, pretty good deficit, and this is specifically around fat loss, because dieting hard when you're bulking up is eating more food, which gives you more energy. But so with somebody that doesn't train much and isn't used to training, a lot of times it's easier for them to do a pretty hard diet, or a pretty solid diet, and then add a little bit of training in. They can start some walking, a little bit of strength stuff like that. Nothing's going to burn them out. And they can peel a lot of fat off that way. The alternative is if somebody, when I owned the gym, if somebody had made the energy or the mental choice to come in and train with me, right? And we had a reputation for training very hard. Our gym's logo, I'm wearing the shirt underneath this, had a big bull on it with a barbell. It's relentless strength training. Like, it's not a, whatever you want to call it, not a pansy gym where you just come in and float around, right? So they had already in their mind, they had made the decision to train hard. So in that case, even though I would have probably recommended them start on the nutrition end, and the reason why nutrition is easier for a lot of people is because they're already eating. Training is a new habit. Nutrition is something they're already doing. It may not be very good, but they're already eating. So making adjustments to a current habit, and we'll get into that actually later in this video, is a lot easier. But anyway, so if somebody had made the decision that they were going to train hard, then we focus on the training. We got them into the training. We got them feeling good. We got them feeling strong. We got them over that initial soreness hump. And they saw progress. Definitely they saw progress on the strength and training part of it. But a lot of times they saw some fat loss because, you've added a bunch of exercise. So even if we didn't touch the nutrition that much or didn't stress on it, people saw progress. And then I would find that after a few months where somebody really got comfortable with the training and they were able to train pretty hard, but they felt good. They weren't sore all the time anymore. Psychologically, they were comfortable. They were comfortable with the space, comfortable with us as coaches, comfortable with the program, how it was going, and I felt safe in that regard. Then we could turn the dial up on the nutrition. And we could say, okay, now we've hit a stasis point on training. Now we can kind of train hard because now now we can diet hard because now you're no longer training hard. You still are working hard, but you're not training under severe stress. So pick your hard and pick whichever one's easiest for you at this point. Don't necessarily just because so and so says to do this or so and so celebrity does this or your buddy down the street does this. Don't necessarily do what they do. It may be right, may be wrong, but it's not necessarily what you need to do at this point. So pick one or the other. Diet hard or train hard. Don't do both at once, especially if you're fairly new and just starting out, because you're just totally going to burn out. And it's going to be a disaster. You're going to spin your wheels. You're going to feel like crap, and you're going to probably quit this whole thing. So pick one. All right. So that's the seven components of this video. That's the 7 things that you don't want to do when you're doing your fitness program, right? So to recap real quick, first one was trying to train everything all at once. Pick a couple of things to focus on. Strength, size, speed, endurance, mobility, whatever it is, particular exercises if you're a competitor. Focus on a couple of things at once that don't contradict each other and focus on them. Put everything else on the back burner, which doesn't mean leave them and ignore them, but they're not your priority. Just seek to maintain those other qualities. And then after a period of time, whatever your program is, swap to the next one that makes the most sense from there. Number 2 was don't miss sessions. Again, life happens. You're probably going to miss a session here or there. But by and large, if you miss a lot of sessions, you're not doing your training program as prescribed. And you're mentally getting yourself in the habit of missing sessions and not training. So you're better off coming in on a day where you're not feeling it and doing a B effort versus an A+ effort and just getting in, checking the boxes, because then at least you're making use of that like lower threshold for maintenance and making small improvements. Not every session is going to be a winner, but by showing up and continuing to do it, then you're going to end up making more progress in the long run. Number 3, over warming up. Don't over warm up. Do warm up, but come in, get your body moving through some ranges of motion, get a little light sweat going, do a couple warm up sets on your first couple of exercises to get in the groove and get your nervous system primed. But a good warm up, 5 to 15 minutes, no more than that. Anything more than that, and it's really turned into a workout that isn't going to be hard enough to really create a good training effect, but it will wear you out and put you in the gym for way too long. Number 4, jumping weights too fast. The body only can adapt so fast, right? And when you're brand new, the body adapts very quickly because it's a nervous system. Nervous system adapts quickly. Actual tissue, muscle strength, and connective tissue, tendons, ligaments takes longer. So give your body that time to adapt, attenuate, make little small jumps frequently, ideally, like, every week, every other week, whatever it may be, whatever you can do, but make little tiny jumps. Your body will adapt to that much, much better than trying to make these huge 20, 30-pound jumps every week, because you'll just burn out and you'll be stalled and you'll have nowhere to go and you'll probably open yourself up to injury. And if you're injured, guess what? You're going to totally backslide. That's not useful. Number 5, changing exercises too fast, right? And I understand boredom in training. Trust me. I've been doing this a long time. But if you try to change your exercises every day, every week, you'll never get really good at doing them. So you won't make a lot of progress because you won't be stressing the things you actually need to stress. You'll be at the beginning, you'll make a ton of progress because it's all new, right? And the first time you try something to the second time, you'll make a ton of progress because you've tried it before, right? But it's just like anything else. You got to practice. And really, strength training in particular is more of a practice than it is an exercise. So focus on, strength is really more of a skill development than it is like just pure exercise. So if you change your exercise around too much, you're not taking advantage of that skill and you'll stall out after a few months. You won't make a lot of progress after that because you never got good enough at the movements. Number 6, majoring in the minors. Again, super common now because the internet has given us 1,001 rehab exercises and little tweaks you can do to improve a movement, and I'm all for it. I'm all for improving movements. I'm all for prehab. I'm all for rehab, but they don't all need to go in your program, right? Focus on the big things you're trying to accomplish. And then if you have a little bit of room for icing on the cake, put that in there. But focus on your big meat and potato exercises that are going to move you forward, that make the most sense for your program, and get really good at those. Hammer those movements over and over again. Get great at them. And then, like I said, when there's something a little extra that you can fit in there, great, do it. But don't throw a whole bunch of minor crap in there and try to make it into a program, because it turns into this big bloated mess that has a bunch of contradictory exercises that are not going to make you see progress. And number 7, training and dieting hard at the same time. Don't do it. Pick a hard, right? This is, again, primarily for fat loss, but if you try to diet too hard, you're not going to have much energy to train and make progress. And if you try to train too hard, that's fine, but you're not necessarily going to be dieting at a hard level. You can't do both at the same time. You got to pick one, whichever one makes the most sense for you based on where you're at, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're used to, that type of thing. It depends on a lot of situations, but pick one. Don't do both. We all love that, like, oh, I dropped 30 pounds in 40 days story. Great. But chances are the progress stopped there. That's why a lot of those programs you see advertised, they only show 6 weeks or 8 weeks of progress, because they hammered somebody with both the training and nutrition real hard. And after that, the progress totally stalled because the people got burnt out. You're better off running this for the long haul, which is going to mean picking a hard, whichever one it is, and doing that versus trying to do both at once. All right. So let's talk about 2 of the most important acronyms you can come up with for your training program, and you can utilize in your training program to make even better sense. So what I'm going to talk about today is MRV and MED, right? Maximum recoverable volume and minimum effective dose. So this applies to life as well. This isn't just a training thing, but I'm going to stay on the training side for the most part today. So think about whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in your training program. Everything you're trying to do, every exercise, every workout or whatever, is going to have a certain threshold that your body is going to respond to. So if you, like, let's say you could bench press 225 pounds one time, right? That's your max, right? If you come in and you bench press an empty bar, 45 pounds, you're probably not going to see any progress, right? It's not going to make your Big Macs get any better, because your body is an adaptive tool, adaptive machine. Your body is going to only grow from things that stress it. And there's going to be so much that's below the threshold of stress. So a set of 1 rep, 5 rep, 10 reps with 45 pounds is going to be below that effective dose, that minimum effective dose that you need, right? So that may be 185 for 6 or 7 reps, whatever it is. But there's going to be a number that you need to hit in order to see progress. That number needs to be known. We all kind of have our various little formulas and stuff like that we do. But over time, you kind of know that if you're making progress at a certain point, you're going to make more progress, right? The alternative is MRV, maximum recoverable volume, is how much you can handle and still recover enough to not go backwards, because your body only recovers so fast. Training is a minor injury, right? It's a stress. So if you train and you only can recover from, say, 5 sets of bench press, and come back a few days later, whatever your time period is in your program, and you're recovered, you're fresh, and you're feeling stronger, that was something you recovered from. But like, let's say you did 10 sets and you were planning to come back 2 days later and bench press again, and you come back and you're still sore and you get warmed up and you do it, and you actually end up having to do less weight than you did before because the fatigue was still there, well, you're not recovered, right? And so now the work you're doing is just pushing you further down that fatigue hole. So you need to understand where those are to balance those out for your program. And it's going to all depend on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, your past training history, your nutrition, your recovery, all that type of stuff. But those are your variables to play with. And the goal is to do the minimum effective dose. And by effective dose, the dose will still elicit a training response. Minimum effective dose underneath your max recoverable volume. Because if you get either too little, you're not going to make progress. You get too much, you're going to get burnt out and not make progress. And most people don't have a good handle on those two things. They don't think about them, right? And whether they use those terms or not, they still don't think about them. So what happens is they either do too little or too much. They don't make any progress. They're not in the sweet spot. So figure out what it is for you to have that sweet spot for where you're at. And now this is where keeping a training journal can be useful. This is where speaking with professionals like myself can be useful. This can be even something your training partners can help you with, experienced guys in the gym, stuff like that, that kind of know enough. They're going to be able to help you figure out where you are for these things. Because if you don't, you're going to end up probably missing one or two of those markers, and you're not going to make the progress you want to achieve. All right, let's talk about a super useful strategy that I like to use for helping people develop better habits, whether it's in their training, whether it's in their nutrition, whether it's in their lifestyle, or whatever it may be. The thing is, especially as adults, we don't have much room in our lives. So when we want to do something new, we want to introduce a new habit, like eating more vegetables, going to the gym, putting money in investments, whatever it is that this new habit is, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources. And we only have so much. Our schedule's full. If your schedule's anything like mine, then the whole calendar's got colored spots in it. You know what I mean? So you got to figure out how to get something else out in order to get something new in. But it can be hard to remove something that's a really long-standing habit. Like let's say something that you want to remove that's negative. Like maybe every night you watch TV and you eat ice cream, but you're trying to lose weight, right? So that's a contradictory habit. That's not helping you. And I'm not saying you should never watch TV. I'm not saying you should never watch ice cream. But if this is a nightly habit, that can make it very difficult for your objective of dropping body fat, right? So better than just saying, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, which is really hard if it's an ingrained habit. Instead, introduce a new habit that moves you towards that direction, that's going to take away the time, the energy, the availability you have for that negative habit. So this is called habit crowding, right? Because you're crowding something in there, and that's going to necessitate that something else gets pushed out. So, for example, with the ice cream one, maybe when you come home at night, you sit down, you plunk down on the couch, turn on the Netflix, grab a pint of ice cream, and that's kind of a routine behavior that you almost don't have to think about anymore. That means it's become a habit. Well, instead, what could keep you from plunking down the couch, which is probably the trigger for that, or grabbing that ice cream? And what could move you in the direction of more positivity? So perhaps it's come home at night, don't plunk down on the couch. Instead, go take a walk for 30 minutes. Right? And whether that happens to be what works for you or not depends on your situation. But what you've done there is you've disrupted the trigger that is going to set you off on the ice cream. And you've done something more positive to improve your fitness, to burn calories as opposed to adding them from ice cream and move you in the right direction. and you've physically taken up more time. So now it's 30 minutes later. So it's 30 minutes later. Well, maybe now you don't have as much time to watch TV, right? So you can kind of avoid that trigger of the TV and the ice cream. Something else, like maybe you have a habit of, you know, eating junk food in the afternoon at work on your lunch break, going down to the vending machine, getting a bunch of junk, stuff like that. So instead, maybe you schedule a more positive thing, like you schedule a meeting during that lunchtime when you know that all the other people are going to be down in the break room, where you're going to kind of sit around and BS and talk and go to the vending machine. So maybe you change a meeting time around to take up that block of time. So now you can't kind of get caught in that thing. And that's going to give you time later to go down, eat your lunch without the temptation of being around everybody else eating junk food, right? Whatever it may be. But think of habit crowding as finding a habit that's positive and using it to displace a habit that's negative for whatever your goal is. You're pushing something out by adding something positive in there, because like I said at the beginning, we're adults. We aren't going to have holes in our lives. We're not going to just get rid of something and not fill it. And if you don't fill it intentionally, chances are that, you're going to toss up in the air, luck of the draw, whatever new habit gets filled in there. And maybe it'll be positive, but maybe it won't. But if you're intentional about it and you choose something positive, it's easier for you to put that in that slot. And now you've made at least a step forward, if not actually recovered a negative step and move forward again. That's a big win. That is huge progress. So that's habit crowding. Make use of it and figure out how to get closer to your goals by taking away something that's not positive and putting something in there. All right, that's all I got for today. Make sure you follow, subscribe, share this with a friend if it was valuable, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. And above all, thank you for choosing to be relentless.